Welcome to another talk on urban diplomacy. I'm very happy to have today André Sobczak with us from Eurocities. André, welcome to be here with us.
Thank you for inviting me.
André, you are Secretary General of Eurocities, so we will talk about the Eurozone, of course, but let's get first on urban diplomacy. What's your definition of urban diplomacy?
From my side, urban diplomacy means that city leaders, mainly mayors, take a clear position on international issues, because more and more we recognize that when mayors are facing challenges within their city, they're actually linked to global challenges. And it's very important for them that they have a clear standing on certain values. We have a lot of our mayors that fight, for example, for more sustainability. And so they are also part in international discussions and hopefully solutions in this field, but also values like democracy or the rule of law, where also mayors could intervene when they have the feeling that in other countries there are situations that are not aligned with their own values. And more we can see that cities are aware of the political role actually they have. And I think it's something that is a positive evolution, because not only national governments can do something about global challenges and global values, city leaders and in particular mayors who are close to their citizens also have a role to play.
And thank you. You already mentioned some of the main topics of urban diplomacy: sustainability, human rights, democracy. Where do you think this definition of urban diplomacy, you do this since a very long time, why do you think a definition of urban diplomacy is necessary in current times?
I think it's necessary because there are more and more initiatives, as I mentioned, from cities and mayors, and sometimes maybe also a confusion. I mean, there are a lot of things that cities can do at the international level. They can just exchange their knowledge. They can have sister cities, for example, where they encourage their citizens to visit another place and discover another culture. Then there are some lobbying activities, for example, towards European institutions, or even at the international level with the G7 initiatives, for example. And there is then this urban diplomacy, which is something different and more specific, I would say, because then it's really a mayor taking a political standpoint concerning a situation in another country, which is not so usual, and which is also, I think, sometimes questioned by national governments. And this is why I think it's important to have a clear definition about it, and maybe also a common understanding, and maybe also a framework that will allow to develop this kind of phenomenon.
Thank you. And we mainly talked about urban diplomacy now under the G7 circumstances of the German presidency and others. And Eurocity works mainly in the European zone and the European Union. Of course, you also do international relations, but let's talk about the special EU context of urban diplomacy. How can urban diplomacy help and sustain the goals and the work of the European Union?
I think you're right. It's important also to develop this urban diplomacy in the European context. For Eurocities, for example, we took the initiative under the leadership of our past president, the mayor of Florence, to go to Ukraine. And not only to meet the mayor of Kyiv, the capital, and who is a member of our network, but also to meet the president of Ukraine, and to say that the different cities of our network, they have a political role, and they want to discuss directly with the national government of Ukraine. And for me, it was also personally very striking to see then that the president of Ukraine said, it's very important for me, to speak to mayors in different European countries. First of all, because he said mayors can support our cities in the urgent situation, but also to rebuild the cities in a more sustainable way once the war is over and won by Ukraine. But also, and this was very clear, to explain the citizens all over Europe that it's important to stand by Ukraine. The president of Ukraine, Zelensky, told the mayors, I need you, the mayors, because as mayors, you are trusted by your citizens. And I'm worried that maybe the citizens all over Europe will stop at a certain moment the support for Ukraine. And I cannot only rely on national governments to make sure that all the citizens understand that the war in Ukraine is not only a war against Ukraine, but also against European values. So it was a clear example where also in the European context, we did something. And then after this, our mayors and myself, we met Ursula von der Leyen. And she also said, you as mayors, you have a strong political role to play. And she quotes more and more our Eurocities, and she talks about her mayors that actually support her diplomatic action in support of Ukraine. Another example that we did at the European level in the geographical sense, when we saw that the mayor of Istanbul risked to go to jail because of his conflict with the national Turkish government. Our network and our mayors also supported directly the mayor. We went to Istanbul to see the mayor, and also we could see that it helped a lot. There was a lot of attention from the media, both in Turkey and in other European countries, because there was a specific mission. Probably it's much more difficult for national governments to give this kind of support to a mayor, but mayor to mayor can actually have this kind of support and then contribute also to see that there are not only one way of defining the future for Turkey, but there are different opinions, and it's important to support them. So also in the European context, it's important. And maybe a last example would be our activities and links in the Balkans. We had in Eurocities not only members that are cities of member states of the European Union, but also cities in Europe in the more geographical sense. And we have more and more actually members, for example, from the Balkans, who see the cooperation with us as a way to prepare actually the accession to the European Union. And it's also, of course, not only a technical support, but it's also political support. When our mayors say, we welcome a city from a country that would like to join the European Union, we already start actually the process, and we give also a clear signal to the European Union and the national governments that we are in favor of welcoming not only the cities, but the countries, of course, then in the European family.
Thank you. And leaving again a little bit the European context, you gathered in mid-June the Brussels Urban Summit together with Metropolis and OECD champion mayors. So somehow a network of the networks for cities. From that, what could you give to cities who see or hear you now and who would think, I would like to get more involved into urban diplomacy or also in the work that Eurocities is doing?
Yeah, you are right. I think that we have seen over the last years more and more willingness from cities to intervene at the international or European level, more and more initiatives, more and more networks as well. And I think that it's now the time to create a clearer framework and also to make sure that we are not in our different networks working in silos, but we work together. So you mentioned the Brussels Urban Summit, where we invited mayors from all over the world by actually having 3 different networks organizing the event together. And also we went a little bit further for Eurocities, because we also invited some national city networks like the German city network, the French, the Italian, and the UK city network, where we also discussed, for example, about how to coordinate our activities, both for the campaign of the elections to the European Parliament, because we know that there wouldn't be a European campaign for it, but it's different national campaigns. So for Eurocities, we do a good work to try to influence the European institutions, but we need also to influence the national governments, and this we cannot do from Brussels. So the idea is to say then the German city network can try to influence the German government, and we would align. So for example, the German city network said when they have their campaign and when they meet the different political parties, they would invite Eurocities. And we can then make sure that what cities ask in Germany, in France, in Italy, and maybe in other countries will be aligned as well. And also we discussed about our role in the Urban 7 process. So also at the international level, because we have 4 European countries that are in the G7. So it's also interesting without saying that it's something that has to be different from Canada, US, and Japan, but still there are some points in common, and maybe it's sometimes easier to already reach a kind of agreement among the 4 European members of the Urban 7, and to make sure also that each of the city networks then can learn from the others, because currently in the G7, what we see, it's good that now they recognize that there is a role for cities. They have developed the Urban 7, but what we currently see is that the national governments take the lead, and then if they want, they invite the cities to discuss an agenda that they have more or less defined. And we came together at the Brussels Urban Summit to say, well, we would like to change, and we started to think about what do we want to see as cities in the agenda for the Italian presidency. And so it's very important that the Italian cities and city networks and Eurocities already discuss with the Germans to see how they did it actually and how they managed to work in a good way with the German government. And also then maybe to have something that will be not only annual projects that have no link, but to have this longer term perspective. So I think that it's quite interesting to see that we have these city networks at the international level, at the European level, at the national level, and to coordinate it a little bit better, to have a stronger impact actually, and to see then how we can also learn from each other, because I mean, we always tell our cities that they can learn a lot from each other, but we as networks, we can also learn from other city networks. Yeah, I think it's also important if we want to make cities stronger and urban diplomacy stronger. We need to coordinate better our own activities. Otherwise, national governments or international institutions can play also one network against the other. And this is, of course, not the aim.
Yeah, it's interesting you just mentioned that with the Italian presidency, you want to work more on it, because my last question was like, for this renaissance of the power of cities in an international context, what is your wish for, let's say, in 10 years, talking again about urban diplomacy?
I think it's important that yes, cities really have a seat at the table when the decisions are made. So as the Eurocities, of course, we are focusing mainly on the European institutions. So on the one hand, as Eurocities, we don't want to become an institution, because we have already the Committee of the Regions, and I'm not sure that it's the best example of actually showing that there is a real impact on the decision making. So I don't want to go this way, but what we would like to have is to have at least one annual meeting between the president of the Commission and the commissioners and the mayors of the big European cities to discuss about all the different initiatives, because what we also see is that more and more, and I think it's the success of different city networks, more and more the Commission understands that they need the cities, so they have more and more initiatives like the mission of smart and climate neutral cities, for example, the Green City Accord, the Covenant of Mayors, and so on. So it's good, it's a success, but it's not really very well coordinated. And sometimes cities are lost and do not really know what are the real opportunities. So it would be better to have something that is maybe clearer, a clearer framework that would allow any mayor actually to see that he or she has an important role to play at the European and international level. And there are clear tools to achieve certain things, and the possibility to have this seat at the table when the decisions are made, and that cities are not only there to implement what has been decided by others, not because we want to have more power for cities, it's because we think that this will make the decisions more impactful and more relevant for the citizens.
All right. Thank you very much, André Sobczak, Secretary General of Eurocities, to speak here at our talks on urban diplomacy here at Cosmopolis.org. And we are very much looking forward to hear more of you in the years to come.
Thank you as well for inviting me, and looking forward to listening to the different podcasts you are preparing in the future.
Thank you.